Hey, Brian, I have been having trouble with my audio. Can you just confirm that you can hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, Lisa, are we ready and recording?
Yes, we sure are.
Wonderful, thanks. I'm going to start the meeting then. This is Gwen Jones. I'm going to commence the Administration and Finance Committee meeting. Today is June 2nd, 2021. We are continuing to do virtual meetings. Posted, we have how to access us to give public comment. That's currently on the screen. In addition to joining the meeting to give public comment, you can always leave a voicemail for City Council at phone number 406-552-6012. And you can also email us at council@ci.missoula.mt.us. And if you want to take that screen down then, Lisa, and do a roll call, that would be great. Thank you.
All right. Stacy Anderson. Let's see. Doesn't look like Stacy's here. Mirta Becerra.
Present.
John Contos. It's like out. Heather Harp.
She's gone today, I believe.
All right. Jordan Hess.
Present.
Gwen Jones.
Present.
Julie Merritt.
Present.
Jesse Ramos.
Present.
Amber Sherrill.
Present.
Sandra Vasica. She's absent. Brian von Lossberg.
Here.
And Heidi West.
Present.
All right, so it looks like we have let's see, 8 present. Is that right?
Yes, that was my count also.
Excellent, thank you.
So we have a quorum. We have minutes from May 19th, 2021 to approve. Were there any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, we will count those as approved. Is there any public comment on items not on the agenda? If so, please raise your hand. And if you want to comment on our agenda item, that will be coming up shortly. Seeing no one, we will go forward and Aaron Cahan, are you here to present today on this item? We have the Development Review Capacity Plan and Fee Schedule Amendment. So we're really looking at fees today, but I think you're also going to give us a picture of what your whole plan is. So if
Correct.
there we go.
Yes. Hello. Erin Pahan, Office, or I was going to say Office of Housing and Community Development because old habits die hard, but the Director of Community Planning, Development, and Innovation. And I am thrilled to be here this morning to share with you all a plan that we have created to address development review capacity, both in community planning, development, and innovation, parks and recs, and engineering. And we're presenting this information along with Donna Gockler and Jeremy King. And in addition to our plan, as Councilwoman Jones mentioned, an amended development fee proposal for your consideration. So just a little bit of context. I've been at CPDI, oh goodness, a little over 6 months now. And one of the first things that I was charged with, both by city leadership and council, and also by the development community, was addressing our ability to respond to development review in a timely manner. Donna, Jeremy, and I are here today to share a three-part plan that will increase our development review capacity and that we feel will put us on the right path to promoting equitable growth and a resilient and sustainable community. In the last several years, the city of Missoula has experienced a surge in development review activities that have prevented us from providing the level of service that the community has come to expect. These delays in development review have had a negative impact on new construction of homes and works against the goals that we outline in our adopted housing policy. So the proposal we're going to share with you this morning outlines short and medium term steps that we think will adequately address this issue. These steps occur in three distinct areas, which you see here on the screen. They include staff, ensuring we have enough skilled professionals in our departments to do the work; process, assessing the review process to identify improvements and to eliminate unnecessary regulation; and lastly, code reform, working to streamline and modernize our code, creating better alignment between our goals and our values in the city of Missoula and the regulations or the tools we have to implement or to deploy those. In the area of staffing, our short-term goal is to amend the land use and engineering fee schedules to support additional staff for development review. We're often asked by the development community why we can't grow our team based on our current revenue as we see the number of building permits increase year over year. I think as a department and a city, we don't do a good enough job educating the community about how these fees break down and where that money goes. For example, the vast majority of what is assessed for a building permit is applied to impact fees, which are divided amongst police, parks, and transportation, which improve our general quality of life as residents of Missoula. They go to sewer development fees and they go to water development fees. A very small portion of a building permit, $127 to be exact, goes both to engineering and the planning department to offset the cost of review. So in short, increased development alone does not directly correlate to increased funding to bring on skilled professionals. So we need to look at this a little bit differently, which we'll get into momentarily. Our medium-term goal in this area is to better understand our staffing needs and adequately plan for this for the future. So we're adding the number of skilled professionals that we need on an annual basis to protect against getting in this kind of more severe capacity deficit in the future. In the area of process, our short-term goal centers around the building permit process. We have recently applied priority in building permit review for residential projects, acknowledging our goals, both articulated in the growth policy and in our adopted housing policy. This ensures that residential projects, especially single-family homes, don't get stuck in the queue behind large commercial projects like a large, new commercial construction or renovation. We're also in the process of updating our checklists and our flow charts, making sure we're providing clarity and predictability in our development review processes. In the medium term, we'll work to take that approach of process assessment to all areas of development review within our department, Public Works and Mobility, and Parks and Rec as well. And lastly, in the area of code reform, our short-term goal will be to create a scope of work for a comprehensive code reform effort. The City of Missoula adopted a very bold and comprehensive planning document in our growth policy in 2015. However, the most recent version of our regulatory code, Title 20, was established over a decade ago and simply does not provide us the tools that we need to actualize the goals outlined in the growth policy. So after years of providing Band-Aid fixes to that code, it's time for comprehensive reform. We'll look forward to presenting our proposal to Council as part of this year's budget process. It's work that we've been engaging in to look at different potential paths and options, and it's work that we're incredibly excited about. In the medium term, our goal will be to launch that work, to get moving on what we know will be a big and bold process, but is absolutely essential. So we know, excuse me, we know that, that an ask to amend the fee schedule and that solutions need to come with very firm and concrete outcomes. We've outlined on this slide what we hope to achieve, what we think we can achieve with additional capacity, process and process improvements in the next 12 months, leading into this broader based code reform. Our short-term outcomes within the next 6 months are to achieve a reduction in time across the board in our building permit reviews. For single dwelling units or homes and duplexes, we want to decrease that review time from 10 to 12 weeks to 2 to 4 weeks. I think Missoula has grown beyond the ability to process a building permit in 3 or 4 days as we may have been able to in the past. We're just a larger community with a different level of development activity, but we do feel strongly we can get back to a baseline of 2 to 4 weeks. For multi-dwelling residential projects, from 10 to 12 weeks to 6 to 8 weeks. For commercial projects, from 10 to 12 weeks to 8 weeks, depending on size and complexity. We also are striving to reduce the time between the receipt of an application and the scheduling of board review projects. So this would include rezones, a conditional use, a subdivision exemption activity. To increase clarity and transparency through updated checklists and process flowcharts, and to improve communication and decision-making through a restructured design review process. And excuse me, my allergies are not my friend this morning. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the design review process, that is where we provide early feedback to projects that are big in scope, scale, or present some complexity, and we ensure we get them feedback and decisions at a timely, in a timely manner so that they can proceed with their design and with that early project development. I do want to note that these timeframes that we think we can achieve all assume the receipt of a complete and a sufficient application, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. So our medium-term outcomes are to adopt an affordable housing incentives program. This was a key recommendation in our adopted housing policy, and we're making great headway on having that proposal ready for council. Improving development review administrative processes, again, taking that work that we're doing around building permit and mirroring that process across all our development review activity. Completing an administrative update to the growth policy and a finalized scope of work for a more comprehensive update that will be in alignment with that broader code reform. And lastly, launching that comprehensive code reform effort, which will have a proposal in front of council regarding during the budget season. So broadly, what do we hope to achieve? Those are some very tangible, specific outcomes, but through this three-part plan of increasing capacity, engaging in process improvement, and scoping and launching this broad-based comprehensive code reform, we believe that we can decrease review times across the board, ensuring that we are not serving as a barrier to new home construction, providing more responsive service to the community, providing more clarity and predictability in the interpretation and the application of our regulations, and ensuring there's better alignment between our code and our goals and values as a community, making sure that we have the tools that we need to actualize that bold visionary plan in the growth policy. So how do we propose to achieve this? What is our first step? Of course, our first step is to add that capacity. We need that capacity to both decrease review times, we need that capacity to engage in process improvements, and we need that capacity to support broad-based code reform. We did an assessment internally in all three departments and feel that this is the level of individuals that we need to add to our baseline staff to get us back on the right track. This is coming after years of not adding additional capacity based on kind of a stagnant fee schedule. And again, going back to that medium-term goal of assessing once we get back to a good baseline, assessing how many FTEs need to be added on an annual basis to make sure we don't get in this capacity situation again in the future. So to get back to this baseline, we know we need 2 additional planners in our planning review team, 1 additional development review engineer in our engineering team, 1 additional parks and review planner on our parks team, and 1 senior planner to help internally align and move forward that comprehensive code reform that we had talked about. And so annually with salary and benefits, that comes to about $358,000. We are proposing developing the revenue for these positions fully through amending our land use and engineering development review schedules. In looking at these schedules, we determined that there were a significant number of fees that were not yet added to the schedule. Either we were assessing the number of activity or the level of activity in that area before adding it to the schedule, or we just hadn't gotten to that yet. And so those include things like annexation, the Setupcane master plan review, zoning compliance permits for TEDs, design excellence review fees, and resubmittal fees, which we'll talk about a little bit in a moment. And that's not an exhaustive list, but those are some of the bigger ones. And then we also looked at what we would need in terms of an across the board increase to generate the amount of revenue we needed to support those positions. And that comes to generally about a 15% increase to development review fees on the engineering schedule and on the land use schedule. There are a few things I want to note there about these proposed changes. One of those is in regards to the 2010 cost of service analysis that the city engaged in. When you review the proposed fee schedule, which can be found as an attachment on eScribe, you'll see that there's a column that is titled 2010 cost of service. This column outlines the difference between what our proposed fee increase is and what was identified through the cost of survey study, which was over a decade ago, as a reasonable charge for this service. You'll note that most of those columns are in red, and that indicates that we are still charging well below the recommended fees in 2010 for each area. The general fund or tax revenue continues to subsidize a good portion of development review, on average about 50% for any specific category. The other thing I want to note is that the amended fee schedule is not an exhaustive list of fees. This only pertains to the land use and the engineering fee schedules. And these are being brought to you separately as part of this broader development review capacity plan, because we are requesting an increase above what would be considered an annual inflationary rate. Other schedules, including the business licensing schedule, for example, will be brought to you as part of the regular budget process, and you're only going to see those standard inflationary increases on those fee schedules that you're used to seeing on an annual basis. So we mentioned resubmittal fees, and this is a new addition to our schedule and something that we're still working through. I failed to mention in my introduction that this development review capacity plan is not something that we created in a vacuum. We have been working alongside the development community since late February of this year to develop this proposal. We have brought multiple drafts in front of them, and their feedback and engagement in this process has resulted in a much better plan that we feel like will help us work in collaboration to move in the right direction. We know that both solving the development review capacity piece and solving some of the barriers to getting housing built on the ground have to be done in partnership. It's not something the city can do. It's not something the development community can do alone. We have to work together in that. And I think we all have a renewed commitment to do that. As it applies to the resubmittal fee, we still have more work to do with the development community on that. And so I want to be candid about that. The city is proposing that we institute a resubmittal fee for substantially incomplete or deficient land use applications and building permits, both of which require extensive additional review with each resubmission. And so we're talking about applications that come in and staff have to spend hours on them and send lists of 27 or 30 insufficiencies back to a developer. And essentially we get a whole new application that we have to review after that point in time. So this additional review negatively impacts review times for all projects, not just that project that comes in with a substantially incomplete or deficient application, because the other projects that come in behind it are waiting in the queue as we work through all these deficiencies. And so we're proposing for those substantially incomplete and deficient applications, a resubmittal fee of 50% of the base fee or final plat fee for subdivision, 50% of the application fee for all other land use applications. And as it applies to the stage review for engineering, that will be calculated based specifically on those criteria, but will fall well below the 50% mark for the original fee. We need to work alongside the development community to create a fair and clear process to define what would be a substantially incomplete or deficient application. We're not talking about 4 or 5 things that didn't get caught. We're talking about the bulk of the application doesn't provide the information that we need to adequately review the project. But we know we have some work to do on those checklists and on our process flow charts to make sure we're being very clear about the information that we're asking for and requesting up front, so that assessing a resubmittal fee is, again, a clear, fair, and transparent process. And so we would not institute these fees until we work alongside the development community to define that. And lastly, just a review, in addition to the amended fee schedule, which we've talked quite a bit about today, we are continuing to make those short-term steps or improvements in the area of process and in the area of code reform through continuing that building permit prioritization process, continuing with our design review team improvements, and bringing that code reform scoping in front of council in just a few months as part of that budget process. And then laying the groundwork for those medium-term steps to make sure that we are setting ourselves up for success. And with that, we will look forward to reporting our progress on these efforts to City Council on a quarterly basis. I did also want to note that Lee Griffin is with us today and can answer any more specific questions that Council might have regarding the 2010 fee assessment and how we determined some of the numbers that we have on that fee schedule as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Erin. Lots of great information and a great presentation. And I did have a chance yesterday. I was looking through all of the fee schedule, very incremental approach, which I appreciate. Did we have other staff from the city that wanted to speak to this? Before we go to questions, hang on a second, Julie. Jeremy, I see you. Did you want to speak to this? Any other staff in terms of presentation, just providing information? Lee or Jeremy? Raise your hand if you want to speak.
Thanks, Gwen. No, I don't really have anything to add. Erin collaborated with Public Works and engineering to really make sure that we were both addressing the capacity in engineering review as well as in planning. So great collaboration there. Appreciate that, Aaron.
Great. Thank you. Mayor Engen, I thought I saw you on here earlier. I'm not sure if you're still with us. Didn't know if you wanted to speak to this matter, but I'm not seeing you. Dale.
Thank you. So Erin had specific outcomes that she was trying to get to related to these, in how quickly we can review projects and how they're prioritizing. And that's a step that we're trying to take across all departments. The other piece of this that we want to look at in FY22, Erin mentioned the 2010 study. We need to update that study, and that study not only attaches the cost of service to our fees, but also our internal service charges. And so we've had a lot of changes in our internal services related to that. So, we're looking to update that. But I think what's important is that we want to have council make very intentional recommendations about the level of, for example, the level of subsidy of development permits in development services. And I think, we want to make sure that's a measurable outcome that we want to report every year, and have council make sure that we are keeping pace to that goal rather than just an inflationary increase. So I wanted to just throw that out there.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, seeing no other staff that wanted to speak to provide information, we'll go to questions, and Ms. Merritt.
Thanks. I want to say thanks to Aaron and Jeremy and Donna. I think it's so important that we have coordinated among all the departments. I think that in and of itself is a big step forward. So I really appreciate all your work on that and the work that you've done to reach out to the development community. I think that's great. I just had one quick question, and it's kind of in reference to a concern of a building project that happened in one of my neighborhoods. And Aaron, I think you heard, unfortunately, from this particular contractor. And so when we're talking about updates to code, I'm wondering if we are going to look into anything beyond Title 20, the situation that happened with a contractor who built a 9-plex without a business license or any insurance was very concerning to me, and that he seemed to slip through a hole in our building permit codes. I wonder if you could speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for asking, Julie. That's a great question. So we hope to not just look at Title 20. One thing we've talked about a lot internally and as a community is whether or not a unified development code is right for Missoula. And I think that's something we're interested in assessing. And regardless of whether we decide a unified development ordinance is right for Missoula, I think we need to look at our Title 12, which is our engineering code, our Title 15, which is our building code, alongside our Title 20, because they all need to speak to one another and work seamlessly, and at a minimum, not conflict or contradict one another. And so I think that needs to be a primary goal of code reform. We also know that process assessment has to be primary goal of our code reform process as well. Some things we can achieve through code, but many of our solutions may be process solutions. They may not be code solutions. It might be more checks and balances to ensure we have a process to determine whether or not folks have a building or a business license before we issue that building permit, right? That's a process piece. And so I think that we need to engage heavily in a process review alongside that code reform to make sure that we don't, at the end of the day, we don't come out of that process with a streamlined, comprehensive, modernized code, but we still don't have the processes in place to implement that effectively, right? So we need to be set up for success there.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Ms. Becerra.
Thank you. I have a comment and then a couple of questions. First and foremost, I just want to say that our staff does an incredible job at reviewing the many components of development review, and I'm happy to support any increase capacity and give the tools that are necessary to deal with the volume and the complexity of the development that we are seeing now, and that I'm sure we're going to see into the future. A lot of what comes before City Council or any decision-making body has gone through an extensive review by our planning staff, and I'm very appreciative of that. And I also think it requires a lot of coordination with different agencies and different departments. So my question, one of them is, how is that gonna change, or how is that incorporated into what you presented? Because a lot of times what holds the review process is that we're not, planners are not getting the agency review that's necessary to move it to the next step. So that holds everything. And I think internally ensuring that that's an expeditious part of the review process is really important. Then a couple of questions that I have. You mentioned the 15% increase in fees. Is that in addition to the regular increase that we have, or is that overall what's going to increase? My next question, if I may, is you mentioned, sorry, I took notes here, resubmittal fees. And I think that's really important because it does hold up that queue of other projects. So I'm glad to see that. But there were, you mentioned Setupcane area and design excellence review fees. Is that in addition to that 15%, or is that part of it? And I'm a little concerned that that might discourage people or developers from either developing in that geographical area or using the design excellence. If there's going to be a fee that's associated with that. And then lastly, I just wanted to know if the shorter amount of review time, what happens to the public process? Is that, how do we ensure that that is still as open and that's still happening, that people have an opportunity, that the public has an opportunity to review and provide comment if we're shortening that window of review?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, great questions. I'll deal with the easy ones first. In terms of the 15% that we're proposing across activities, and when I say generally 15%, I say that because some areas we may have only increased by 10%, other areas might be 17%. And part of that is we really wanted to keep those numbers at or under the recommendations in that 2010 cost of service analysis, but generally across the board, it hits about 15%. Those are the only increases that will occur on that schedule this year. And so we're doing those ahead of the budget season. You will not see increases on the land use or the engineering schedule during the budget season this year. In terms of the additional fees, those are fees that we always had proposed adding to the schedule to offset the cost of work that comes along with those. For instance, the Design Excellence Review Corridor, there's a significant amount of work that now goes into reviewing and approving those projects. We have just never assessed a fee for that activity, that development review activity yet. In regards to the form-based code fee, that really is replacing, when you think about previously, projects would annex and then rezone upon annexation, and there would be an annexation fee and a rezone fee. And so now we'll see an annexation fee and a Setupcane form-based code fee, right? Because they're annexing into the form-based code. And so in some instances, it's a different fee, not a new fee. In some instances, it is a new fee, but it's a new fee for a new activity that we should be charging. We've done 7 annexations since the annexation policy has passed. We have never assessed an annexation fee. And so there's a great deal of work that goes along with an annexation into the city. And so we need to be at a minimum, and again, it's about a 50% recoup of revenues, or I'm sorry, of expenses in terms of reimbursement for that. But those are fees we do need to be charging to ensure we have the staff available to do that review. In terms of the coordination and collaboration of the review, you'll remember that was a big aspect of our realignment, bringing together our departments that work in lockstep to promote equitable development and a resilient, sustainable community, and ensuring that we're looking at the whole, not pieces and parts, which I think we had done previously, which is why in this development plan, you don't just see CPDI coming forward saying we need more planners to do this work, because we know if we get more planners and we're moving in a more efficient, streamlined manner, but Parks doesn't also have that support and engineering doesn't also have that support, the system's just going to get gummed up in another area. So we need to be working as a team holistically, and that includes that agency review process. Part of the re-envision design review team process is that we have a smaller group of individuals involved. Those individuals, the new design review team process requires 4 to 8 committed hours per week to look at these projects, really dig in. To call our colleagues over in another department, whether that be the Parking Commission or the Missoula Redevelopment Agency, who might have an interest in this project, and to get their feedback, to identify those red flags, to identify those areas of opportunity much earlier, so that we're not getting this comment really late in the game, too late, quite honestly, for many developers to incorporate it without considerable expense, and too late for us to capitalize on opportunities to align our goals with development that's happening in the community. And so that process ensures that we're engaging at the most opportune time. And we have a couple of projects moving through, helping us test our new process right now that are form-based code projects, and we're kind of tweaking as we go, but we think we're going to see a lot of promise from that. And lastly, in regards to the public engagement, we feel like this is actually going to improve public engagement. Again, we're going to have better information to share earlier, which always improves engagement. If we're able to share more accurate information with the neighborhoods through that neighborhood council outreach, if we're able to share more accurate information earlier with council, we can get more folks attending committee and public hearings to speak on behalf of these projects, and everything is just going to move at a pace that isn't necessarily, I wouldn't say easier, but is more supportive of getting those housing starts on the ground.
Thank you.
Thanks. Great questions and great answers. I appreciate all the information. I am looking for a motion before we go to the next people here. And we'll be setting this for a public hearing June 21st, I believe. Ms. Cheryl, you're next.
I'd be happy to make that motion. I do have a comment and a question, though, if that's okay.
Thank you.
First of all, thanks. This is great. Great work. I really appreciate just how collaborative and how detailed it is. And think your goal going from 10 to 12 weeks to 2 to 4 is really ambitious. I appreciate it, but it is really ambitious. I guess my questions are around the applications that are substantially incomplete. So I'll do a little bit what Mirta did, ask kind of some basic questions of what I'm looking for. I'm curious, kind of percentage wise or numbers, how many you would consider substantially incomplete, kind of how we're going to define that. And then also as we move forward, how we're going to communicate or educate, hopefully we'll start getting less. I mean, that's the goal too, right? Is to get less incomplete applications. But, how are we going to communicate that? And how are we going to educate if education is actually a problem? I can't even say that's true, but.
Absolutely. So one thing I want to point out, you'll note on the amended proposed fee schedule that we have 0 proposed revenue for the resubmittal fees, because it is not our goal to ever collect revenue in that category. We don't want to charge these fees. We're not dependent on these fees to reimburse us for the cost of staff. I would say that than 10%, maybe 15% of the applications that we get, we would consider substantially incomplete. It's not a high number of applications. Regardless of the complexity of some of these new codes, the vast majority of the development community is in regular communication with their case planner. They're working through those issues. They're doing their best to ensure they provide as complete of information as possible. The difficulty is that small number, those 10% or so of applications that do come in as substantially incomplete or deficient, consume an inordinate amount of staff time. And that's what we're really trying to solve for. We don't want a small amount of the development community, whether that's because they're experiencing the same level of turnover that we are, they have new folks, they're learning our code, or whether, quite honestly, some folks are just trying to get their place in line so they get something submitted, right? We want to make sure that that small percentage of customers of CPDI are not having an inordinate impact on the entire system.
Okay, thank you. I have Mr. Von Lossberg next, and then after that, I'll go to public comment. I do know that we have numerous developers in the audience if they want to give public comment on this. Mr. Von Lossberg.
Thanks. I'll be really brief. I was also going to make the motion, but Ms. Cheryl took care of that. Erin's information resonates on many fronts: staff, process, and code reform. She and I have spoken about this, and it's been a topic. And I think council has consistently, over the years that I've been on it, supported capacity requests when those have been identified, and certainly process improvements. And I'm really keen to hear from the development community. From now up through the public hearing and through that process. Thanks for the collaboration on this.
Great, thank you. The motion is in order. I'm going to go to the attendees. If you want to raise your hand to give comment, press *9. My understanding is that, Erin, you've worked extensively with the development community on this, and it's been very collaborative. Okay, we have Mr. Ryan Frey. You should be able to talk now. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I just want to make a comment, if everybody can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, Erin has been great reaching out to us in the development community through this whole process and putting it together. And so I personally support this plan, and believe it or not, I actually support the fee increases because they're tied to specific timelines. For us, time is more important than a 15% fee increase. So I think we have high hopes for this plan in efficiency, time, and more staff to get things done. So I personally do support it, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. Did anyone else want to give comment, public comment on this item from the attendees? Not seeing anyone. Were there any more questions or comments from council? Ms. Becerra.
Now, trying to double dip here, it occurred to me that in the when you showed us the slide with the breakdown for the amount of revenue that's needed to support 2 planners, the total cost of that list was $358,000. And I'm wondering, I'm guessing that these fees will produce a lot more than that. So where would those funds be stored, if you will?
Yeah, so great question. We are being conservative in our estimates because we want to make sure that the revenue generated does cover the cost of those positions. We know that it will, and likely more, as you point out. That those dollars do go into the general fund, and they would just start to shift that subsidization rate that is occurring right now with general fund dollars or tax revenue subsidizing the cost of development review at about 50%. And so if we see those revenues increase beyond what the cost of these positions are in the next couple of years, you know, we might not see a big increase above and beyond what these positions cost next year. But as we continue to do more of this new activity, especially the annexation, the form-based code review, we do think that will start to increase. That may correlate to additional capacity that we need to add next year and in future years to ensure that we don't get in this capacity slump again. But any additional revenues that come in will just offset that subsidization rate.
Great, thank you. Seeing no, oh, Mr. Von Lossberg, just in time. Go ahead.
I'll go ahead and double dip as well. And I realize that the code reform part is, we're going to be diving into this much more extensively during budget, but since you brought it up on the slide, Aaron, I just wanted to comment that, I mean, it resonates. You and I have talked about this, and I think, you know, I have thought a lot, especially during the legislative session, about our ADU policy, for instance, and the way we have incrementally improved that policy since its adoption, which actually was right before Jordan and I got on council. And, you know, we looked at things like the conditional use review, which was removed. We looked at parking requirements, which were removed. There's continues to be, and there were other aspects that we have improved through the Title 20 process. But the point I wanted to make is, I think your point of that we've kind of reached, I feel like, a point where we go through our Title 20 review every year, but we're not getting the comprehensive interplay worked out between Title 10, Title 12, Title 20. And I think that's what speaks to me the most about sort of a comprehensive code review. So, and I'll end there.
Okay, we are just about out of time, but Ms. Merritt, did you have something quick?
I did have another question that I forgot to ask. In the beginning of your presentation, Erin, you had mentioned incentives for affordable housing, I think just in brief, but you didn't really touch on that anymore. And perhaps this is a conversation for another day, but if you could comment briefly on that, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are embarking on the first phase of a two-phase process to build out that affordable housing incentives program. We know that a portion of that will be programmatic and will speak to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and how we can support the type of affordable development that we know we need in the community, both in homeownership and in rental homes, through a programmatic approach, right? Offsetting the cost of fees or offsetting the cost of development. Some of that will be code-based as well. So how do we incentivize through code, whether that looks like more compact development, reduced parking, the different types of code incentives that we have available to us, streamlined development review. And so we are right now just embarking on an analysis of that, making sure that we're looking at all of the different options available to us. And the housing team, Montana James, and our brand new housing manager who started with us yesterday, Ricky Henderson, will be bringing something to council on that in terms of a process update probably soon.
Great, thanks for asking that, Julie. That was in the back of my mind also. I just will briefly comment and then we'll take a vote. I just want to say thank you, Erin. This is a huge topic that you have broached today specifically, but it's frankly within the context of affordable housing that we have been talking about for years, and that has become incredibly heightened in the last 12 months or so. So this all is a heavy lift, and this first component that we're addressing today, the fees, is really kicking off a much larger discussion. So we're going to be hearing other presentations. We're going to be hearing this in a public hearing. But for right now with these fees, I just wanted to articulate that I think Erin is really threading the needle between a lot of different balancing components, in that time is money. So people want to get through as quickly as possible. We don't want the city to provide barriers. We also don't want to have exorbitantly high fees. So it's this threading the needle, and we clearly need an adjustment because some of those are outweighing others right now. And I appreciate all the thought that's gone into this, and I appreciate the support and the collaboration from the development community. Given that, we will take a roll call vote.
All right. Stacy Anderson,
Yes.
Mirta Becerra,
Yes.
John Contos,
Yes.
Jordan Hess,
Yes.
Gwen Jones,
Yes.
Julie Merritt,
Yes.
Jesse Ramos, Jesse, I think you might be muted. Oh, I got the thumbs up. We're good.
Yeah, my computer messed up.
No worries. Amber Sherrill,
Yes.
Brian Von Losberg,
Yes.
and Heidi West.
Yes.
So that's 10 yeses and 2 absents.
Thank you. So that will go on the consent agenda to set the June 21st public hearing. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. I appreciate the robust discussion, and we will stand adjourned.